Hey everybody, the purpose of this video is to give you some solutions to the second grade quiz, the one on Burma Road. So we just walk through it question by question. It's pretty straightforward, but because there's a graphic involved, it might be a little more challenging to kind of process. So question by question, the first couple questions are, at what elevation does Burma Road start? So when you start hiking up that uphill, and then the second question is, at what elevation does it stop? I think the start is a little bit more, less clear. The start elevation versus the stop elevation. The stop one I think is pretty straightforward. I think it stops right about at 3,600 feet. It seems to come to an end right at that topo line of 3,600. I'm going to say topo line a lot in this quiz, topological line. In the quiz I teach you what they are. So 3,600 feet appears to be where it stops. It looks like it starts below 3,000. It's a little tricky to tell how far below 3,000 that it stops. I'm guessing, I'm going to call that 28. I think they're 40-foot topo intervals. So we're going to call that, how about we'll call that 2960 maybe? You can call it, 2960, 2920 maybe. If you want to feel better about how much you climbed, call it lower. You could always use a GPS to get a better reading. And then the overall elevation change from bottom to top is going to be just the difference of those two. So I'm guessing that's somewhere around 680 feet. 680 feet-ish, somewhere in there. Okay. So you climb 680 feet over that distance, which is pretty rad. So that's the first 3 points. It says now work on the run. This map has a scale of about 1 inch to 0.2 miles. So every 1 inch that you measure on the map is going to be 0.2 miles. This was a little bit tricky because it's not a straight line. It's not like you can just take a ruler and slap it down and then kind of measure out where it ends up being. So what I did was I recommended you guys, if you wanted to, you could take a string, which is actually a pretty slick way of doing the map. Take a string, lay it along the entire path, and hold the string on a ruler. And I think I did that, and I got it at right about, I think it was 6 inches I ended up getting. 6 inches, which corresponded to roughly 1.2 miles overall. So that's what you ended up traversing on the trail. Then it says convert your answer to feet. So we have to do, let me use Google to get you any kind of. It's going to be 5,200 plus maybe 6,400 feet. 1.2 miles in feet is going to be 63336. I'll call that 6,400 feet. Close enough. And you'll notice I'm doing some estimations here. It's because all the measurements we're doing are fairly roughshod. We're pulling all these measurements off of maps, strings, rulers. If you needed more precision, you'd go out and actually do it. And then it says find your run in feet, and I believe I made a footnote about this. Remember why it really isn't the run. That's actually the hypotenuse. If you think about it, if you think about what you're hiking on Burma Road, the elevation change that you get to 680 is clearly the rise. In order to do the grade, which we're about to do, is you need to have the run. So technically speaking, you'd have to use the hypotenuse, which is what this 6,400 actually is, and you'd have to use that down here at the run. But we're going to go ahead and just call that 6,400 feet. Now it's not. It's actually less than that because in a right triangle, the hypotenuse is the longest side. But because the angle isn't extravagantly large, we learned in class, and you'll also learn it on your out-of-class exam, that you can interchange the hypotenuse and the run when the angles are pretty small. Triangles drawn horribly not to scale. What's the average grade? So your average grade of Burma Road is your rise over your run, which would be 680 feet over 6,400 feet. If it was 640 over 6,400, it'd be 10%. That's a little bit higher than 10%. Let's just go ahead and do 680 over 6,400. We end up getting 10.6%. But I told you to do the nearest percent. That would be 11%. Now, you got to realize something, friends. Some of you are going to get slightly different answers here. Some of you might get 9%, 10%, 11%, 12%. that's okay. These numbers are all based on your estimates of these values here. So you can see if you estimate this closer to 3,000 feet, that you're going to have a smaller run, which means you're going to have a smaller numerator in this fraction, which means you're going to have a smaller overall grade. So, I mean, don't worry too much. I'm looking more for process. That's why there's a W next to that question. I wanted to see your process. Average angle formed, it's up to you really how you do this. I think probably the easiest way is just to use a tangent table. I'm going to use a Google trick, the arc tangent of a point, what did I just say it was, 11% in degrees. And it's telling me it's going to be about 6 degrees, which is roughly a 6-degree angle. So you might be, I'm guessing you're somewhere close to that. Mine was a little bit over, you might be closer or a little bit under. We're all going to be in the ballpark of that one. Okay, so now that you've seen those first few, the relationship of those two, the my son one is extraordinarily similar. I think you can probably figure it out. I mean, my rise over this journey, it obviously starts where Burma Road stops, which is 3,600 feet. It runs up all the way to the top of that butte. Now this one's a little bit tricky. If you look at the picture, it goes past 3,800, past 4,000, past 4,200. Up to you to decide how high you want to go on that. Maybe 4240, 4280. It's kind of hard to tell. That butte, if you look at the picture from earlier in the quiz, that butte rounds off. So you could just call it 4,200 at the max there. The run would be done the exact same way. Use a string on the map. Same scale, because it's just a snapshot of the original picture. Average grade, you do it just like that. And then the average angle formed would be done using a tangent table again. So now that you've got this one knocked out, you can definitely do the last 4 points same way. Hope that helped.